gold in gold with no storage costs ever. Visit interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David. From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, David Granosky. So glad to be back with you all. Hope you had a great holiday weekend and that you were able to reflect on your communist love of labor and all that entails with that holiday, a good old American holiday. People think that, all they got to do is just vote for Team Red and then they'll get rid of the communism. Little do they know it's baked into a lot of the different institutions that people rely on. So it's going to take a little bit more than a superficial election every 4 years to purge ourselves of our communist infection and our ideals and our institutions, the things that we have that we rely on. That's always going to be a tough one, but to let go of. But nevertheless, we persist in teaching the truth, like we always do on A Neighbor's Choice, guided by the personhood principles of Jesus. A lot of haters out there, a lot of haters that want to get us off of our good, positive thinking. They want to get us mired in the muck, getting us all bothered by superficialities, looking at people for what they look like, looking at them for superficial reasons rather than looking at things based on the truth. But we have to continue to pursue excellence, no matter what the losers and haters around us want us distracted by. There's a lot of things to be distracted by. And it's up to us to persist in challenging the status quo, regardless of what superficial distractions arise. So I want to get into this quote here that Donald Trump said yesterday at his Labor Day press conference. He says, quote, "I'm not saying the military is in love with me. The soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. But we're getting out of the endless wars." That's an interesting statement to make. And it's something that stirs a lot of debate. A lot of folks will say, well, he hasn't really done enough to end the wars. And I agree with that. But on the other hand, it seems to me that, is the president really in charge in that regard? These armchair keyboard warriors, they talk a big game, but, he should be out. And hey, look, I agree. I've said the same thing. But if you think about it on another level, perhaps if they were president and they said, all right, I'm pulling out, they'd realize it's another game too. Maybe they'd realize that they themselves, being purists, maybe they've put too much faith in the power of the presidency itself, that it actually maybe doesn't have that much power after all. Maybe it's more like a PR spokesperson or like a mayor, more of a ceremonial role rather than an efficacious role. This isn't to say that the executive branch needs any more power, but notice there's a difference between the executive branch and the presidential office itself. The executive branch is, of course, lawlessly out of control, way out beyond the bounds of the constitutional limitations, for sure. But the difference between a unelected bureaucracy of one-party control of the two-party system, that's a big difference between that and electing what appears to be more of a mayoral role with the presidency. No matter who you elect, somebody else is in the way saying, no, we're going to do it another way. Is that one of the reasons why your media has been conditioning you to hate Donald Trump as an existential threat to democracy? Is it because he's challenging something which no one is ever allowed to challenge, namely perpetual war machine? The perpetual war machine that funds so much of the media advertisement and the foundations and the bureaucracies and think tanks surrounding DC? Maybe that's why they have tried to Pavlovian condition you into seeing him as such a unique, distinct, terrible thing. Maybe their bigoted love of dropping bombs on foreign countries and starting new regime change wars and using politically correct speech to sell it to a dumb and gullible public, maybe that's the elephant in the room. Maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe it's Donald Trump's refusal to use politically correct lies and politically correct speech to sell awful, dastardly wars. Now, does that mean, again, that I agree with his foreign policy? No, I don't agree with sanctions. I think sanctions are an act of war, okay? But I never said that Donald Trump was a principled, philosophical purist, did I? What I said was, perhaps those who are the purists sitting in their house talking about, well, if I was president, I'd have those troops out there. Maybe they have put way too much cartoonish faith and power into the presidential role itself. Maybe there's a much, much different picture once you are in that mayor-type position. Once you realize that if the Pentagon says no, that seems to be the final say on a lot of these matters, doesn't it? I don't know one way or another what it's like in there at that conversation. I've heard that Donald Trump has wanted to pull out troops of Afghanistan for a long time, and they keep getting not happening. It ends up not happening over and over again. Why is that? I actually think that he actually is sincere in this. The armchair purists at home, they say, no, it's all politics. I'm sure there's politics there, but I actually think he sincerely doesn't like the endless wars. But the question is, does he actually have the power, as people believe he does, to pull out of those conflicts? And is that the reason why the media has tried to paint him as an existential danger to our country? Is the money too great for them to mess with having someone off of the normal script for selling politically correct language on behalf of evil, wicked wars? Is that what's going on? Is that why we see such unprecedented, unified hatred on the part of the media? Every hard news break you hear, even on radio, it's a press release for one party. It's a very Orwellian experience. I mean, they don't even hide the fact that they're writing opinion editorial garbage as hard news reporting. And it's everywhere. It's not just the usual CNN and Washington Post and New York Times. That's the obvious ones. But it's every single banal media outlet, just about. Pushing for more war. Pushing this new narrative that, be prepared, they say. Hillary Clinton gave advice to Joe Biden earlier. Remember, she said, whatever you do, do not concede the election. Something's going to happen, she said, right? And then you have the folks over in Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, which we'll play in a minute. Mark Zuckerberg saying, we're going to make sure that if anybody wants to say that the election has been called on the night of the election, well, we'll be there to make sure we flag that and let the public know that that is not the acceptable choice. Is that creepy or not? You know, if you're going to have a democracy, if that's the way you're going to run things, you have to be disturbed beyond belief that this is happening right in front of your eyes. You want to talk about an attack against the rule of law, to have a private business owner speak as if he is the de facto caretaker of the government and say, well, you'll see. We're going to play it in just a moment. You're going to hear for yourself the words of the czar, Mark Zuckerberg, when we continue live on A Neighbor's Choice. Stay tuned. Mark Zuckerberg next. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well-informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
I'm attorney Young Kim. The financial problems caused by the coronavirus nightmare are not going away anytime soon. If you are behind on your credit card or mortgage payments, or bill collectors are harassing you, there are ways to get them off your back and legally wipe the slate clean. Call Consumer Law Attorneys at 888-99-FRESH for a free consultation. Learn how we can stop the bank and collection companies and help people in debt get a fresh start. Call 888-99-FRESH, 37374. Main office, St. Petersburg.
Excuse me, do you know how to get to Maine and Maple?
How's that cook? How do you change the ringtone?
How much does this cost?
Does this bus stop at Elm Street?
We ask questions everywhere in life, except...
Any questions?
No.
At the doctor's office, ask questions.
What is this test for?
Are there any side effects?
Questions lead to better healthcare. Go to ahrq.gov for a list of 10 questions everyone should know. Questions are the answer. Public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski here with you, and we're going to set this clip up. This is a clip from Axios on HBO with Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook. And I think let me see right here. I think we may have the wrong clip. Let me see if we have, I'm going to check this real quick because I want to get the right one here because it's just absolutely amazing to see the kind of, the way they talk. The way these folks that run Silicon Valley sites, the way they talk about the election as if they are the caretakers of our country, that they're kind of like the new bosses, that there's the, silly stuff like elections, and then there's what they get to decide because of the influence that they have. So, one of the things that people are concerned about is what happens the more our life becomes digitally centered. With this lockdown political situation, a lot of folks are now sheltering in place in perpetuity. And now it's opened up this place where the digital world has become the new centerpiece of our life. And so if you have these digital ghettos like Facebook that have such a massive control over the digital footprint of our daily activities and connections, they become kind of a de facto government, don't they? So let's go to this clip by Mark Zuckerberg on Axios, HBO, and then we'll comment from there.
On election day, it's over, but it might not be, right?
I think the dynamic that you're talking about is really important, which is that we may not know the final result on election night. One of the things that I think we and other media need to start doing is preparing the American people that there's nothing illegitimate about this election taking additional days or even weeks to make sure that all of the votes are counted. In fact, that might be important to make sure that this is a legitimate and fair election. So we're going to do a bunch of different messaging around that just to make sure that people know that that's normal. So if one of the candidates in any of the races claims victory before there's a consensus result, then we're going to add some informational context to that post directly, saying that there's no consensus result yet. I think that this is important because there is, unfortunately, I think, a heightened risk of civil unrest in the period between voting and a result being called or after that. And I just think that we need to be doing everything that we can to reduce the chances of violence or civil unrest in the wake of this election.
If that were to happen, would Facebook be blamed in part?
Well, I can't speak to what other people would do, but I think we're trying to make sure that we do our part to make sure that that none of this is organized on Facebook. We want to make sure that none of that stuff is happening on our services. But the country is very charged right now. So I think regardless of what we do, there's some chance that this happens across the country. I just want to make sure that we do our part to not contribute to it.
Okay, I don't know what that noise is, but is that the battery falling apart on the robot talking? I don't know. But anyways, that's what you see here is you see this arrogance, this hubris, where he's basically telling you, he's signaling the same thing that we heard earlier with Democrats saying, we're not going to concede the election at night. We're going to make sure we let this thing drag out weeks as we look for ballots. Ballots will be found in the swamps. Ballots will be found in Antarctica. Ballots will be found on top of the mountains and in the Himalayas. We're going to find ballots wherever we can find. The dead will rise, and the Himalayas will sing, and we will bring ballots forthwith. This is what they're saying. And you see they got an entire cartel of corporations who control what people are able to see and click on and view on social media ghetto sites. And what are we going to do about it? This is now a new kind of, nightmarish Orwellian picture for folks that I don't think we've ever really seen before in our country, where these people are able to say, you know what, don't worry about the election. It's not going to happen the way you've been told it's going to happen. We're going to have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks for a very dubious counting process to take place. Reminds me of a clip from another Silicon Valley tech guru. So let's hear this clip from Bill Gates about what he thinks about whether we have the choice to determine our future. Go ahead.
You don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. People don't feel like going to the stadium when they might get infected. You know, it's not the government who's saying, okay, just ignore this disease. And, you know, people are deeply affected by seeing these deaths, by knowing they could be part of the transmission chain. And, you know, old people, their parents, their grandparents could be affected by this. And so you don't get to say, ignore what's going on here. There will be the ability, particularly in rich countries, to open up if things are done well over the next few months. But for the world at large, normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population. And so
there you have it again. Another unelected billionaire corporatist who's talking as if he would decide you don't have a choice. Life will not resume until everyone's vaccinated in the world. You're not going to have your normal life back. Who are you? You know, what medical qualifications does he have? And who made Mark Zuckerberg the king of deciding how the election will look? Why are they coming out and saying these things and saying, folks, get ready. You're not going to have your election ritual like you're used to having. We're going to do a different kind of ritual this time. You have, 10 states that allow you to put in a ballot the day before the election right now? A mail-in ballot? That is a mess. That's a nightmare waiting to happen. And we're not supposed to question, who are these people? Who elected these people? Who are these people speaking for us and controlling the entire conversation? They're saying they're going to flag as wrong any candidate who questions any ballot. Who said this? Who said that this was the person that could say anything? Why do we continue to allow a bunch of elitist, pseudoscientific billionaires push this country around and then be lectured to by these people that we're not generous enough, that we haven't shared our wealth enough, that we need to have some of our communist scraps that they've thrown on the ground for us to pick up. We need to have some of those taken away so that some of the crumbs can be redistributed to another segment that's more politically correct, someone that doesn't use real speak. Who are these corporatists? What do they have to say that we need to listen to? Are these people going to be the new unelected oligarchs that continue to control this economy and squeeze the life force out of the middle class and then yell at us that we have too much of the scraps that they've thrown in their redistribution schemes? I don't think we're going to put up with this. I think it's time to say no to these fools, to turn them off, and to drive them out of business with better products, better services, better ideas. Drive these garbage ideological tyrants, drive their ideas out of the marketplace. That's what I think needs to happen. Until we get around to that, I think we're in for some rocky times. Back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
You know what time of year it is.
Hurricane conditions in the next 36 hours.
You know what hurricanes can do.
Devastating damage expected.
Well, we want you to know, no matter how bad things get.
Power outages.
This is life-threatening.
You can stay up to date with the latest information here. Your home for news, talk, and information. And remember, we'll keep an eye on the tropics. You keep an ear on us.
Got batteries in the flashlight.
The all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Yeah, we got our radio set.
A
state of emergency in California with massive wildfires. 15 members of a fire crew suffering burns and smoke inhalation when they had to deploy the safety tents to protect themselves as flames swept over them, battling the Dolan fire near Big Sur. Fires also trapping hikers in the Sierra National Forest to the north with helicopter rescues today, and separate fires also burning in Southern California. Governor Gavin Newsom blaming climate change for the record high temperatures fueling fires.
We experienced yet another massive record-breaking heat wave over the last 3 days. Highest temperatures ever recorded, as an example, in Los Angeles County, 121 degrees.
In Florida today, President Trump telling supporters in the battleground state he's extending a ban on offshore drilling off the coast for the next decade. It comes as he's facing criticism over his handling of the environment from rival Joe Biden. And on Wall Street, stocks extending losses with tech shares slumping again. Michelle Franzen, ABC.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host here. Our website is aneighborschoice.com. That's aneighborschoice.com, where you can subscribe and listen to our podcast. If you miss an episode during the radio show, you can always go back and watch all of our episodes or listen to all of our episodes on aneighborschoice.com. And joining me now is a good friend of the program, someone who I consider to be my go-to guy for understanding criminal justice and matters of police conduct. He's an expert witness who does a lot of work on different trials, providing expert testimony. We have Detective John Baeza with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you on again. And I always like going to you whenever there's a police issue or something going on in the news where there's a lot of different competing narratives, because I know you're not going to be biased by, some kind of partisan politics. You're just going to look at the facts and give us your analysis as you see it. So your website for folks who want to find your expertise and your credentials is nypdtruth.com. But today we wanted to talk to you about kind of your recent research you've been doing into the George Floyd death, which was, of course, kickstarting this whole summer of protests and conflicts in the street. So maybe give us some background on how you took an interest into this case and what you found in your latest research.
Well, I originally saw the case like everyone else, probably a YouTube video, or the video that was taken, and the optics of it looked horrible. You have a guy with his knee on somebody's neck for over, 8 minutes, and two guys on his back for the same period of time. I haven't changed my view that it's a police-induced homicide of George Floyd. But what I have noticed, and I've done some experiments and I'll explain them, is that the guy who looks the worst, Derek Chauvin, I don't believe that anything that he did, physically that he did, actually contributed to the death of George Floyd, except for the fact that he's guilty because he should have stopped the other two guys and took them off and took George Floyd up and brought him back into the police car, or stood him up at least. It was very clear. So there were all three of these, or four, I think there are four officers, are all guilty to some extent of the murder of George Floyd. But I wanted to bring something up that your listeners might not recognize, and that is the fact that I read the full autopsy, and when they checked his full back, they they cut from the neck. I won't be too graphic here, but they cut from the neck all the way down to the buttocks, and they'll check and see if there's any bruising or any underlying bruising underneath, the skin. Mm-hmm. And there was none. They checked the back strap of the neck, and there was none. They checked the laryngeal area, your front of your neck, the front of the neck, and there was no damage or particular hemorrhaging or anything to that area. And what that tells me is if Derek Chauvin was actually had his knee depressed very hard and tried to constrict the air, you would probably have more than likely you would have subcutaneous. In other words, if you pull the skin back, you'd have some bruising in there, and you would probably have some crushing of the larynx and probably some petechial hemorrhage in the eye. Those are pinpoint hemorrhages that happen when not enough of blood is coming to the face, to the brain, and these are tiny hemorrhages. Usually you could see them in the eyes and so forth. But what I did recently is I did a test. I had my brother, as a former law enforcement officer, I had my brother lean on my neck. I laid on the ground with my hands behind my back on a flat surface, hard surface, and I had him put his knee on my neck, and I would tell him, keep putting pressure, and he put a lot of pressure with his knee. He must weigh. He's a trim guy, but I don't know. I guess his weight is probably about maybe 210, 220, and he's taller. But he pressed his knee against my neck, and he was able to just keep my head down just by putting the knee there by the neck, and he was able to control the pressure. So he's able to not really put much pressure on the neck, but yet control my head from going, moving back and forth. So that I found very interesting. The second thing I'll explain to you, and then I'll let you speak, I'm sorry, is that I had my brother and I had my nephew, who is only about 80 pounds, but I had both of them. I laid on the ground again, and I put my hands behind my back, and I had them kneel on me, on my back, with their knees. Now, that's maybe 300 pounds. It's not like two cops, but I had a nephew who's 80 pounds, and that's the best I could do at the time. And after about a minute and a half or so, I became a little bit uncomfortable with the weight on my back. Breathing or whatever. It wasn't screaming or anything, but I felt that if my nephew was heavier, it would have probably been a much shorter time, and I would have been very, very distressed. Mm-hmm. So that's where I come with. I think that all the cops that were on the scene are guilty in some way or another of the murder of George Floyd, no doubt. But I think the optics make it look like Derek Chauvin, who's guilty, but make it look like he stopped the breathing. I do not believe that. I believe the two cops that put their knees on his back stopped his breathing because he had an enlarged heart. His heart was, 20 grams heavier or bigger than it should be. And, he was a big guy, kind of a big guy. But when you press that down, when you depress that, you depress your whole chest, the diaphragm gets depressed, his heart, which is enlarged, gets depressed, and he had a 97% occlusion on the carotid vein, which is, heavy duty. And when you press that down, that's gonna cause death in somebody like that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I came out with, and I'd love to hear any questions you have or remarks.
So, based on your looking at the facts, do you agree with the charges? What was the charge, the type of murder charge they levied, and do you agree with that?
Yeah, that it was caused by restraint, But I believe that the main restraint was those cops on the back, not on the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Not that, and again, this does not clear Derek Chauvin. He was part of this. What he should have done was stop these guys and, and bring George Floyd to his feet, or, just get these guys off him. You don't need them on the back. He should have done that, and so should that other cop that was just standing there. I mean, they all need to stop this. So they're all complicit in and accessories in the homicide of George Floyd. So don't think, I hope your listeners won't think that I'm saying, listen, Derek Chauvin is an angel, he's all right. No, he is guilty as the next guy. But I do not believe that his neck compression with his knee caused the death of George Floyd. I do believe it was the two guys on his back.
Now, has he been charged with first-degree murder? I'm not familiar about that.
I don't know exactly what I wish I could tell you, but I believe he was charged at least with second-degree murder. Listen, at this point, they all committed a murder, a homicide. What level you call it or whatever, that's up to the criminal justice system, I think, to make the determination. I certainly would not give any credit to Derek Chauvin or anything. I don't want anybody to think that. I just want to be specific about, how he was killed. Mm-hmm. Another thing is he had what they considered a lethal dose in his bloodstream, but Dr. Bodden, who did the second autopsy, he came to the same conclusion that it was a murder by the police officers. It was caused by them. But he also said that you could not tell what a fatal fentanyl dose is, because you don't know if the person's a regular user, is he a one-time user, has his tolerance levels built up to it. And he mentioned the same thing about all narcotics, and that especially goes with cocaine. I've done a lot of research on that. Just for an example, somebody can be considered an overdose of cocaine, say, for 4.5 milligrams per liter. But yet there was a gunshot victim who was not overdosed, who had 60 megally, the toxicity of it. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody else that had 200. So there's no way to tell that is specifically what caused it. But I can tell you that the compression, just based on the compression on the chest, it did cause it. Also, I will also say, in one of the most esteemed forensic pathology books that mostly just doctors have, cops really don't buy the book, very rare. But inside of it does say that if you compress somebody like this, it will eventually stop them from breathing. The diaphragm gets crushed, the heart gets crushed, and they also talk about another experiment that was done by a police department on a police sergeant. They put him down, handcuffed him, put him on the floor. It was an experiment. They had two other cops get on top of him. Within a minute, and this guy was in good shape, within a minute, he was saying, "Let me up, let me up." The two cops that were on top of him thought that he was kidding. But eventually, within seconds, he was going nuts, trying to get up. He felt he couldn't breathe. And then they let him up, and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we thought you were kidding." And he's like, "No." So it was about a minute. It only took a minute for somebody who was in shape, handcuffed behind the back on a flat surface with two cops leaning on him, and he was in good shape. He didn't have a heart like George Floyd had a heart that was, I think it was 20 grams heavier than the maximum heart that you should have. So this is where I am at with the George Floyd case. Maybe it's not exactly the breaking news that listeners expected, but I think it's very interesting for listeners to know that we have to look at every single thing, and we have to do experiments, and we have to learn what exactly kills people. And I think the pressure on the back has to be a consideration now for police departments. I know in New York they have a thing, a new rule about the knee on the back, but that is not, it's very vague. So it needs to be made more specific, so cops who end up rolling around with somebody and maybe they get the knee in the back for like a second or two, that's not going to cause somebody's death. But if you're laying on somebody's back I talk about a minute, we're talking in the George Floyd case of 8-9 minutes. I mean, that causes death. So all the cops are complicit in the murder. I just wanted to bring up those facts of the case because I thought the listeners might find it interesting. And also, we really have to take care and maybe start re-looking at the knees on the back and the pressure on the back of people who are face down, whether they're healthy or not, it doesn't matter. We really need to take a look at that and maybe change some rules about that.
So
I know it's not going to save everybody.
So was the force applied to the back that the two other officers were doing, was that part of protocol, or is that usually outside?
Well, that's according to their protocol. They can do some sort of a knee hold. Now, that's putting a knee on a person. But that's only if the person is resisting. So quite frankly, what Derek Chauvin was doing while George Floyd was not resisting, he was violating their rule about putting pressure. So were the other two guys who put pressure on the back. But as I said, this does not clear anybody. This is I still believe firmly the police, all the officers had complicit in the murder of George Floyd. But I think we should learn a lesson out of it and start saying to ourselves, we got to be careful with, we got to make some rules so cops are not leaning or putting pressure on somebody's back, whether it looks like they're overdosed, it doesn't matter. We can't do that. I mean, again, my brother and my little nephew on top of me, and after a minute and a half or so, I was in a little bit of distress. I think if I had somebody else besides my nephew, I probably would have been less than a minute, a minute or so.
We're here with Detective John Baeza, his website, nypdtruth.com. We'll be back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice. We'll be back in just a second. Hold on. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less, delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
For over 18 years, I've enjoyed an AV rating of 5.0 out of 5.0 from Martindale Hubbell. I received this from my fellow lawyers and judges. If you've been injured, call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM. At Diaco Law, we will take your call.
Medical malpractice or wrongful death? Call SOS. Call Diaco Law at 888-SOS-FIRM for a free injury case evaluation.
And remember, there's no fees or costs unless we win. At Diaco Law, we will take your call.
Baseball is back, and as always, the name of the game in baseball is to go home and be safe. Well, nobody protects all the pieces of your life like Italiano Insurance. Whether it's your home, car, life, disability, long-term care, Italiano keeps you safe. We can never predict what's going to happen at a baseball game, and we can never predict what's going to happen in life. So call the trusted agents at Italiano and make sure you're covered. Welcome back, Rays and baseball. Call Italiano at 813-877-7799 or go to ItalianoInsurance.com.
Our monetary system is failing. Negative interest rates, growing debt, highly speculative market, and the dollar is being devalued by the Fed. Investing your wealth has never been more challenging. Who wants to earn just 1% interest annually in a savings account? There is another option, monetary metals. They pay interest on gold in gold, with no storage costs ever. Visit interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here with my friend, retired Detective John Baeza, who's a police expert. He's my go-to guy to understand about police practices and procedures and rape, sexual assault cases, false arrests. You can go to his website, nypdtruth.com, to read some of his articles, follow his work, or reach out to him if you'd like to talk to him. Go to nypdtruth.com. So, Detective Baeza, I wanted to continue. You were saying that, basically, all the officers involved in the George Floyd murder are still guilty in your eyes, but it was just a different way in which it happened as the media has portrayed it. It wasn't Derek Chauvin with the knee on the neck that was causing the direct act of killing. It was the two officers putting their weight on his back, right? Because of the examination of the autopsy, as you've read it. Right?
Exactly, Dave. You spoke it just like I would speak it. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. As I said, it's not some bombshell where I'm saying the cops are innocent or anything. No, they're all guilty. But it's something we can learn from, or police should learn from. But we know they rarely do, but they should learn from this. We should learn that, listen, we have to have some rules and regulations about putting weight and pressure on somebody's back, anybody that is, because it is compressing the heart and the diaphragm. Those get compressed when you push that enough weight down on the back. Mm-hmm. Now, also, I just want to let you know, during the autopsy, they found no injuries to the back strap, the entire back, nor the neck or whatever. But that doesn't mean that, see, with Derek Chauvin, for him to have caused George Floyd not to breathe, I would expect to see some subcutaneous, underneath the skin. I would expect to see some hemorrhaging. I expect to see some petechial hemorrhaging, maybe some injuries to the cricoid or the laryngeal area, whatever. But we didn't see that. But there was no injuries underneath when they went through it. But there doesn't have to be injuries, just pressure. When you put pressure down, you don't necessarily have to bruise somebody or injure them. You're putting pressure on them, on their back, we're talking here. you're putting pressure on their back. You may not be bruising them, but what you're doing is you're crushing their chest. And it's very clear. There are in many of the books, there are graphics out there that will show you how compressed, how the compression works, and it's very, very dangerous. And
it sounds like an awful way to die. It sounds like an awful way to die, and certainly not the way you should handle a $20 bill being fake. If that's the case.
Exactly. And the $20 bills, I've read that some people say, the $20 bill, that's a serious crime. Please, I've worked, where I've worked, Dave, and we've talked before. I've worked in the ghettos. I worked down in Florida too, but a $20 bill that's counterfeit is not a huge issue. One of the other things I will bring up, and maybe it's something to think about when you look at the video, but I don't know why they put him in the police car. I don't know why they took him back out of the police car. They kind of dragged him through the police car. One of the main things you learn as a cop, and I'm in New York, but anywhere really, is that when you arrest somebody, you put them in the car and you bring them to the station house right away. Because otherwise, in Harlem, we get a crowd of 100 people there. So what you're taught to do is, boom, you get them, you put them in the back of the car, and especially now they have cages. In New York, they were cheap. They didn't have cages back when I was there, but now they have cages. So it's rather safe. So you put somebody in the back of the car, and then you take them to the station or the hospital or wherever you're going to take them, and then you don't have all this. You're not going to. Why are you spending 10 minutes holding the guy down? Get him up, put him in the car. And they already had him in the car, though, too. When I watched the video, they had him in the car, and somehow they dragged him back out. I thought it was ridiculous. Keep him in the car, and then bring him. If you feel that he needs medical attention, bring him to the hospital or bring him to the police station. That's it. So I wanted to bring that up, too. That was another point.
We're almost out of time, but
I wanted to bring.
We're almost out of time, but I wanted to say, have you been able to ascertain a possible motive in the facts that you've studied so far? I know you don't have all the details, but you're known for doing your frame by frame analysis, and there's been a lot of swirling ideas about motives. Any thoughts on that?
On the motive for the police officers?
Yeah. Why would they treat?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that their motive was to premeditate to go out and kill the guy. And even while they're on the back, I don't know what their motive was. I think a lot of times it's the power thing, and they're gonna, they do what they want. They're just cops. But I would find that difficult right now. I'd have to actually maybe interview the police officers and find out. But it's a terrible incident, and I'm sorry to have to be brought it up again. But I think what I had to say. I think maybe there's something to it that we need to look at that can help in the future from people dying like this at the hands of police.
Well, Detective John Baeza, I always enjoy learning from you. It's tough stuff. It's sad stuff, and we got to change it. And the only way we can change it is by looking at the facts and then going based on what's right and our conscience. So I appreciate your time, and I want folks to visit your website, nypdtruth.com. That's nypdtruth.com. Thanks for joining me, John, once again.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Very good. When we continue, we're going to hear from someone who lived under the Chavez regime in Venezuela about what life was like as the country fell into the hands of socialism and what we need to know about in America today. I'm David Gronowski. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.